thanks to the whole Sterling team for the invitation to speak here today. Medical surveillance is nothing new to Sterling or to True North. But if a year and a half ago, anyone would have told us we'd be having discussions about mask mandates and workplace quarantines and vaccine passports, we would have assumed they were talking about a script for a bad sci-fi movie. But here we are today, investing huge resources in these very topics. Who's at risk? How do we protect our employees, our customers, our vendors? How do we know when it's safe to return to the workplace? And we're doing all of this in an unprecedented environment of just rapid fire changes in recommendations, in policies and procedures, even in science. We've never faced these kinds of changes as rapidly as we're seeing them happen today. But hopefully we can help. The True North engine that powers Sterling's medical surveillance program was specifically designed to be nimble, to allow for rapid customization to meet a client's need and to meet any kind of new scientific information being presented to us. True North's capabilities really lie in defining and tracking compliance, whether that's coming from a regulatory body like the CDC or DOT or OSHA or all the acronyms that Nick just threw out, or whether it's medical guidelines or even best business practices. So really the COVID-19 issues fit right in with our expertise. COVID-19 has really kind of served to highlight some of our other services as well, as far as tracking training that's required, or even proving up the credentials for contractors or non-employees to come onto your work site, or for your employees to enter your customers' properties. Each of these have really helped our clients kind of meet the COVID challenges in addition to the regulatory kinds of environments that they have to meet. So from the standpoint of medical surveillance, quite frankly, documenting that a dose of vaccine has been given, that's really simple. You could do that with an Excel spreadsheet. The challenge comes in having a system that can handle multiple protocols. So with Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines, there are multiple paths to a successful vaccine. And the most likely way for someone to be protected by a vaccine is to stay within the protocol they started. So if you start with Pfizer, your second dose is with Pfizer, and it's given within the proper number of days between the first and the second dose. Your system also, though, needs to be able to monitor test results, whether you're measuring antigens for a person who's actively ill or antibodies for a person who has had exposure to COVID. One of the challenges we're going to be facing is if you define a need for a booster, what's going to be the frequency of that booster? Will some types of vaccines require boosters and others not require them? That takes a pretty sophisticated system. But even more sophisticated is you have to have a system that's not going to just track the expected events like a vaccine, but also those that are unexpected, like a person who has a positive test and how you're going to respond as an employer, an employee who reports to you they've had a contact with a person who is positive, and even adverse reaction. So it's obviously not the employer's job to track an adverse reaction to a vaccine. CDC has an entire system to be able to do that. It is still something that an employer has to have knowledge of. What's interesting to me about the impact that COVID has had on occupational health is the acceptance of telemedicine. So in occupational medicine, we've done online medical surveillance for a long time. It's been well accepted to do online respirator questionnaires and clearances, but now there's greater acceptance to that. And those kinds of tools are all built into True North. We've had difficulty getting employees into health clinics, even with employers that have had their own workplace medical facilities, employee health clinics. They have taken their aspects to telemedicine. And so you need a system that can gather sources of medical testing and medical events together into a single place. Next slide. And you know, of course, COVID-19 is not the only disease out there that's a part of medical surveillance. It's certainly our hot button. It's something that has driven a lot of companies who've never really looked at their medical surveillance program or their immunology issues to take a look at it. But in addition to vaccines, there's also the immunologic picture that has to be painted by blood testing and skin testing for things like tuberculosis, and the question of whether or not an employer is going to allow declinations into their employer programs. And as Nick said, much like the passport discussion, we won't get into whether or not declinations are allowed, but it's something it's a conversation that an employer needs to have before they put a program in place. So here we're looking at an example of an employer and an employee. You would just chose an example as a driver with a CDL. The system lets the employer be able to see at multiple levels. So they can view on an individual employee a compliance summary that provides dashboards to allow them to be able to see where this employee is in compliance. This same view is available directly to the employee, where the employee can only see their own records. It gives, again, a dashboard where specific actions here in these cases, there's a COVID infection prevention training due in the next 7 days. This particular individual, because the DOT driver, has driving qualification. For their medical, they have they're compliant in their exams and audiograms, but they're missing their their respiratory protection program events. Their vaccine is compliant, and their COVID testing and hepatitis B medicals are compliant. From this same screen, though, if I've got an event, let's say this individual has a respirator questionnaire, I can go directly to where that information would be submitted. So can the employee. The employee can go from their login directly in and be able to do a Dropbox or attach a document to a text or to an email and submit that particular document by pulling it in or dragging it in here and submitting it. That helps to take some of the burden off of the employer's administration. Plus, where you have information that's very sensitive, like, for instance, healthcare records, it allows that employee to know that they are sending that information directly into Sterling's medical surveillance system, as opposed to, for instance, sending it into HR or to a safety professional. So it gives them a little more sense of security as to where that information is going and how it's being managed. From this view, I can also see things on a higher level. I can view, for instance, this particular location's compliance summary, where it's adding all of the employees from this particular location and giving me a dashboard to know where I should be putting my attention from the standpoint of what kinds of compliance actions need to be taken. So it sets alerts, it sets them on different levels, and a manager can come down this column and see where their focus should be. In this particular case, you have a number of medical events that have alerts attached to them that would allow them to be able, for instance, the COVID vaccinations allow them to be able to then take action. The reporting system is very flexible and allows you to be able to produce reports that will allow you to create something like, for instance, this particular report is what I would call a to-do list. It's a compliance planning report that not only identifies what particular items are missing, but it also tells me what events need to happen in order for this person to stay compliant in the future. So this report can be put in the hands of a frontline supervisor. It could be sent by notification directly to the employee, just their information, obviously, of the actions that they need to take. So it gives that potential for, I view it kind of like when self-service came into play with the human resources systems and people were able to make decisions about their benefits themselves. Here now we have the ability to do that as it relates to compliance items and put that power of staying in compliance and taking action on those events that need to be acted on, put it as close as you can to the employee without losing the ability to escalate non-compliance. If the employee doesn't take action, it can go multiple layers up as far as notifications so that nothing can fall through the cracks or fail to have action taken on it.
That's great, man. Really appreciate the demo and more importantly, I think your partnership over the last decade plus and the time here today.
I appreciate that.